Hi, from an artist to an entrepreneur. We have the pleasure to welcome Nika Fontaine today. She will tell us what inspires her as an artist and how her entrepreneurial project is shaping cultures. Welcome, Nika.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So, I was always wondering what made you actually become an artist.
I don't know if it was really a choice. I grew up in an environment where art was everywhere. My grandfather and his brother were painters, so I always say my mother language is visual arts, and because as a kid I grew up in a house where there was not enough walls for the amount of paintings we had, and that was in all the family. So this kind of became my standards, and seeing my great uncle as a professional artist and living off of it for many, many years, I also had an understanding that arts is not only a hobby, but it also can be a career. When I had, of course, some interest in it, and then I got a lot of support from my great uncle and my grandfather.
Cool. So it's basically the environment where you were born. But what inspires you in your paintings, in your sculptures? What inspires you in your art?
Well, another passion of mine is and has always been spirituality on many different levels. So researching different philosophies, practicing it, and esoteric. And that also comes from my family. I grew up in a background where my mom was very spiritual, and she was maybe more interested in some New Age type of spirituality. But another great uncle was a Cistercian Christian monk, which was very close to the family. And this led us to have although we were not practicing Christianism, we had a deep respect for the sense of devotion to a spiritual practice. And when I started to paint more seriously, when I was between 16, I would say, I was looking for topics that I deemed relevant to be presented and painted. And I couldn't think of anything else than what is life, or what is life? Is there life after death? What is the meaning of life? And through those questions, basically, I explored different spiritual philosophies and expressed it through my art.
Yeah. And what is, in general, now I'm just curious, your process of basically painting or doing an artwork?
I mean, of course, it depends of the series, it depends of the mediums. It will often, for a series, I would define some boundaries. For instance, what I'm actually producing right now is a series of drawing on metal, or metal embossings to be more accurate. And the topics it's basically illustration of stories from the Zohar, which is also called the Book of Revelation from Kabbalah. And it's a philosophy that I started to study 3 years ago, and I find extremely rich in its complexity, and where it also actually is the source of most of the main Western religions, and it's much older than we might think. There's some rumor that it might come from Atlantis, and then was passed on in Egypt, and then was passed on in the Middle East, and became today's Judaism, Christianism, Islam, and that's basically the root of all those philosophies. So, and there's also a lot of knowledge about numerology, sacred geometry, astrology. Tarot comes from Kabbalah. Basically, I came to Kabbalah through Tarot. And so by exploring that in the drawing, not only it's a way for me to promote this knowledge or this culture, but it's also a way for me to just simply absorb the knowledge and integrate it more within myself by let's say, making a personal interpretation of what I understand from the texts and scriptures.
Yeah, but in general, actually, would you be reading a book and then you're like, hey, I want to represent this thing in a painting or a sculpture, or it's more coming from people, or do you go to nature? Do you have any habit or common practice that's leads to this to your art?
I mean, this new series is very illustrative. So then I would read passages and try to illustrate them. But what I was doing mostly in the last years was very intuitive. So I set guidelines, boundaries, which could have been a color palette, basic compositions. And then my practice consisted of meditating for as long as I was really able to reach some kind of transcendental state of mind, basically emptying my mind completely, being in a deep sense of the now and not in any expectation. So no expectation of the art market, that this type of painting sells more, that that has been done before, that so also my personal expectations, trying to get rid of all of them through meditation, in order to be able to canalize more the intuitions, the essence of the moment. And,
Yeah. And what do you have any expectation? How should people perceive this? Is it more like do you want them to be in the same states of mind? Do you want them to have an idea or to question things? What do you have in mind usually when you think about the other people on the other side who will consume your art?
I know there's a lot of artists that try to really control the way their work is perceived in every single detail. So, of course, in the way that it is presented in an exhibition context, or also the text that accompanies the work in order to very much describe precisely what the work is about. My approach, though, is different in that sense. I really like to give freedom to the viewer to see what they see and to take what they want to take. So I don't. Of course, I will have some text to explain in exhibition context, but also I try to make them a bit poetic and open to understanding, because that was my experience to art at the very beginning, and still today was mostly through abstract art from the 50s in Canada, which is the same as the paintings from the 50s in the US, where American Expressionism, Pollock, this type of gestural. And these types of works were, I think, meant to be an open space for interpretation, especially about feelings. And this is something that I always loved about art, where it's basically, it becomes a mirror for the viewer, the mirror of your soul, and this can change through life just by living with the same painting. I mean, I grew up with some painting that I still see whenever I visit my family, and the way I perceive them and what I see inside of them is very different from what I saw 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And this, for me, it's a really strong artwork when the work can evolve with you.
Cool. Yeah. And as an artist, of course, like I know a lot of artists and I know the challenges that they have, but what are the challenges that you are facing or you faced?
I mean, of course, we all know this basic struggles of the artist might be financial, because sometimes it costs a lot to produce works. It costs a tremendous amount of money to go on art fairs and shipping and all those things. But on a more personal note, I transitioned 5 years ago from male to female, and though the art world is really open-minded, I did had some setbacks through this transition. There is still, I think, a big way to go, and in terms of equality. For instance, I've been refused from one gallery because they say we already have one transgender artist and we don't want to be identified as a transgender gallery. But they don't have any problem to have 5 male artists and 5 female artists. Also, I've been refused a show in a place where they said, well, our clientele is a bit more conservative in this region of the world, and if they know you are trans, then they might not buy the works. So this is some personal challenges. There's also today is changing. I would say in the last 5 years, the scene is a bit changing regarding spirituality. But spirituality was also very taboo within the art world.
Yeah.
It was perceived as kitsch or old-fashioned because of the history of sacred art, and then sacred art that was the norm for hundreds of years, and then modern art broke that up, and then modern art and postmodern art then brought in complete detachment of religion, and through modern philosophy as well, rationalism, and saying, okay, we want to separate from the church, we want to separate from religion, we had enough of that in the arts, now art should be free from it. So me bringing that up today, I had a lot of questioning from curators or spectators, and saying, why do you do that today? Why is it relevant today to still do that? So that's been a big challenge, but luckily, happily, there's in the last 5 years, there's more and more artists bringing up spiritual practices. So slowly it's opening up again, which is great.
Cool. Yeah. Also, what really inspires me in you is like this transition from an artist to an entrepreneur, which I really know it's very hard for a lot of artists. Can you tell us a little bit more about your project Origin? What are you trying to how it started, and what are you trying to achieve? What's the vision behind?
Yeah, so Origin is a non-profit organization for holistic regenerative development. The mission is to revitalize rural regions, and through the integration of art, spirituality, in circular economy. How it started, and the purpose behind was that through my art alone, I wanted to have an impact on social change and life quality directly of people. And I felt that through the art, I could maybe raise awareness, of course, but it wouldn't have a direct impact. And also, often the art scene, we can perceive it as an intellectual elite, and in some cases also financial elite. So the public to whom I'm speaking is actually not the people to which I want to impact their life.
Yeah.
So I designed this project Origin where by joining art, spirituality, and entrepreneurship, we can have a holistic view of some social issues and creatively work together to solve those issues. And this is also a mindset that I have in my art or in my personal philosophies, that we should try to seek the common denominator of every single problems, instead of trying to solve symptoms, really trying to heal the seed of all those problems. And in order to do so, I think the only way possible is to have an holistic vision and to include everybody in the problem solving. So from art to spirituality to entrepreneurship, science, research, engineer, and all those people basically would come in our centers, which are kind of like campuses. The first one in development, which is in Spain, in Villalonga, which is in the province of Valencia. And those campuses are a mix between the art residency, startup lab, and a spiritual retreat center. People would come there for between 1 week to 6 months. They can work on their own projects, but at the same time, we have projects within the community, and all those people collaborate in order to bring those projects to life. And those projects would enhance the life quality and revitalize basically the region, which is economically or demographically struggling.
Yeah, cool. Another question that I have actually about this project is like, how do you deal with the cultural differences when you go to different countries? Do you embrace them, or do you try to just spread a new culture that you really believe in?
We definitely don't want to spread a culture that we believe in. We really don't want to have this colonizer effect or mindset. So it's more about empowering the cultures that are local and understanding them and connecting them with similar cultures that might seem on the surface very different, but by talking to the people, it's all about communication and truly listening, not just hearing, but listening and understanding. So going in different villages, talking with the locals, talking with the spiritual leaders, let's say, of those cultures, and truly trying to understand what is the core essence of their spiritual practice. And by comparing all those different spiritual practices, then most of the time you find much more common grounds than differences. And the differences might be in terms of symbols. One uses a cow, the other one uses an angel, the other one uses a frog, or but in the end, if you go and you narrow down to what is the value of that mythology or that metaphor, and what is the message that is being carried, it's very, very, very similar. And even if you go in something which is not talked so much about, but the mathematics of spirituality, there's common denominators in almost all the religions or spiritual practices. Mathematics, I'm talking about sacred geometry, which can be translated in numerology, architecture, when you see monuments or monoliths or patterns, geometric patterns that are used in symbols. It's there is a common ground to at least most or all of the religion that I've so far digged into, which is very fascinating. And once you show to people that there is this common denominator, I think it unifies much more than separate.
Yeah. I'm definitely looking forward to see your project like in different countries. Thanks a lot. Do you have any last word advice for our like audience?
Maybe a word that I can would be trying to distill whenever you face a challenge, whenever you face a social issue, really try to distill to the smallest denominator possible, which is the values, what is truly being meant, or what is truly the seed of that problem. Because otherwise we end up like just in Western medicines, often we treat the symptoms but not the cause and the source. And I think this is the new challenge that we face today. And it's not new, but today there's more and more social entrepreneurship, which is fantastic. And solving the seed, I think it's much more impactful. So,
yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for watching, and thanks a lot for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.